Are you ready for what could be the most massive winter storm to hit the eastern United States in over 10 years? Right now, at this very moment, a catastrophic weather system is forming off the Pacific coast, and in the next 72 hours, it will transform into a monster that forecasters are calling a bomb cyclone. Here's what's shocking. Some cities are about to receive more snow in one weekend than they've seen in the entire last decade. We're talking about snowfall totals that will break records that have stood since 2014. And if you live anywhere from Georgia to Maine, you need to hear this. In exactly 30 seconds, I'm going to reveal which major city has the highest probability of seeing over 18 inches of snow. But first, let me tell you something that the major networks aren't emphasizing enough. This isn't just another winter storm. The atmospheric setup happening right now is textbook perfect for catastrophic snowfall. And by catastrophic, I mean life-altering for millions of Americans. Here's your reward for staying with me. According to the latest European model data updated just 2 hours ago, Raleigh, North Carolina has a 78% probability of receiving between 10 and 14 inches of snow. Boston, Massachusetts is looking at potential totals exceeding 24 inches in some areas. And here's the twist that nobody saw coming. Charlotte, North Carolina, a city that hasn't seen meaningful snow since January 2022, could receive its biggest snowfall since 2010. But timing is everything. And that's exactly what we're going to break down city by city, hour by hour, for over 70 locations across America. Because knowing when this storm arrives in your neighborhood could be the difference between being safely prepared and being dangerously caught off guard. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you saw weather models from both the European system and the American GFS model agreeing this closely on a major snow event? If you've been following weather forecasts for any length of time, you know that's rare. Very rare. And when it happens, you need to pay attention. Right now, there's a piece of the polar vortex, this massive circulation of cold air that normally stays up near the Arctic, and it's breaking off. Meteorologists call this a lobe. Think of it like a river breaking through a dam, and this lobe is diving south at an unprecedented speed. By Friday afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, this Arctic air mass will be positioned perfectly over the Great Lakes region. But here's where it gets interesting. At the exact same moment, a completely separate weather system is moving off the California coast. These two systems, and I want you to picture this clearly, these two massive weather engines are going to collide over the southeastern United States. And when they do, the physics involved will create something called bombogenesis. Now, I know that sounds like something from a science fiction movie, but bombogenesis is a real meteorological term. It means the atmospheric pressure is dropping so rapidly, so violently, that the storm intensifies at an explosive rate. We're talking about pressure drops of 24 millibars in 24 hours. To put that in perspective, that's the kind of pressure change you normally only see in hurricanes. Here's the critical detail that everyone needs to understand. This storm will have 3 distinct phases, and where you live determines which phase affects you most severely. Phase 1 begins Friday night between 8 p.m. and midnight Eastern Time for the southern states. Phase 2 hits hardest Saturday morning from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Time for the Mid-Atlantic. And Phase 3 reaches peak intensity Saturday afternoon from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time for New England. But before I give you the city-by-city breakdown, let me show you why this forecast has such high confidence. Right now, if you could look at the upper atmosphere at about 18,000 feet, you'd see wind patterns that meteorologists dream about, or have nightmares about, depending on your perspective. The wind in the jet stream is doing something called divergence. Imagine you're in a swimming pool and you push water away from you in opposite directions. That creates a void, right? Water has to rush in from below to fill that gap. The exact same physics applies to air in the atmosphere. When upper-level winds spread apart, air from below rushes upward to fill the void. That rising air creates lift, and lift creates storms. Now here's where it gets technical for just a moment. But stay with me because this explains why the forecast is so certain. The polar vortex lobe I mentioned earlier, it's transitioning from what we call a positive tilt to a neutral tilt and eventually to a negative tilt. In plain English, that means the storm is becoming more organized, more vertically stacked, and exponentially more powerful. And at minute 5, just like I promised, Here's the detailed forecast you've been waiting for. Let's start in the deep south and work our way north. If you're in Atlanta, Georgia, snow begins Friday night around 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Peak snowfall occurs Saturday morning between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. Total expected accumulation, 2 to 4 inches, with the northern suburbs possibly seeing 5 inches. The snow ends by Saturday afternoon around 3 p.m. Augusta, Georgia. First flakes fall around midnight Friday into Saturday. Heaviest snow from 8 a.m. to noon Saturday. Expected total, 1 to 3 inches. Ends by 2 p.m. Saturday. Columbia, South Carolina. This is where things get interesting. Snow starts Friday night at 10:30 p.m. But here's the critical detail. Columbia sits right on the edge of what meteorologists call the dry slot. If the storm tracks just 50 miles closer to the coast, Columbia could see 6 to 8 inches. If it tracks 50 miles further offshore, totals drop to 2 to 3 inches. Peak timing, Saturday morning, 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. Charleston, South Carolina, snow begins around 11:30 p.m. Friday night. This will be mainly a coastal event here with 1 to 2 inches expected. The wild card is mixing with sleet. Peak occurs Saturday morning around 9 a.m. Everything transitions to rain by noon Saturday. Now let's move to North Carolina, where this storm really shows its power. Charlotte, North Carolina, mark your calendars. Snow begins Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and this isn't going to be light flurries. By midnight, snowfall rates could exceed 1 inch per hour. The heaviest snow occurs Saturday morning between 4 a.m. and 10 a.m. Expected total, 6 to 10 inches, with some models suggesting 12 inches in southern suburbs. This would be Charlotte's biggest snowfall since December 2010. The snow ends Saturday afternoon around 2 p.m. Greensboro, North Carolina. Snow starts at 8:30 p.m. Friday evening. Peak intensity Saturday morning from 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. Expected accumulation 8 to 12 inches. Ends around 3 p.m. Saturday. Raleigh, North Carolina. This could be historic. Snow begins Friday night at 9:30 p.m. But listen to this carefully. Raleigh sits in the bullseye of multiple forecast models. Peak snowfall Saturday morning from 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. with thunder snow possible. Yes, you heard that right. Thunder and lightning while it's snowing heavily. Expected total, 10 to 14 inches, with some areas potentially seeing 16 inches. This would be Raleigh's biggest snow event since January 2000. Durham, North Carolina. Nearly identical to Raleigh. Snow starts 9:30 p.m. Friday. Peak Saturday morning, 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. Expected total, 10 to 15 inches. Fayetteville, North Carolina. Snow begins 10 p.m. Friday night. Peak Saturday morning, 7 a.m. to noon. Expected total, 5 to 9 inches. Wilmington, North Carolina. Snow starts 11 p.m. Friday. But here's the complication. Wilmington will likely see a mix of snow and sleet, possibly transitioning to rain Saturday afternoon. Expected snow accumulation, 3 to 6 inches before the mix begins. Now here's something crucial that affects the entire coastal region of North Carolina. The Outer Banks, from Nags Head down through Cape Hatteras. This area is looking at blizzard conditions. Not just heavy snow, blizzard conditions. That means snow combined with winds gusting over 50 miles per hour, creating whiteout conditions where you cannot see more than a quarter mile. Snow begins in the Outer Banks around 10:30 p.m. Friday night. Peak intensity Saturday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Expected accumulation, 8 to 14 inches, with drifts potentially reaching 3 to 4 feet due to the extreme winds. This is a life-threatening situation for anyone in these areas. Do not attempt to travel. Moving north to Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia. Snow begins 9 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. Expected total, 9 to 13 inches. Winds gusting to 45 miles per hour will create significant drifting. Virginia Beach, Virginia. Nearly identical to Norfolk. Snow starts 9 p.m. Friday. Peak Saturday, 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. Total, 9 to 14 inches. Richmond, Virginia. Snow begins 8:30 p.m. Friday night. Peak Saturday morning from 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. Expected total, 7 to 11 inches. Charlottesville, Virginia. Snow starts 8 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning, 5 a.m. to noon. Expected accumulation, 5 to 9 inches. Now let's jump to Washington, D.C. and Maryland. Washington, D.C. This is a closer call. Snow begins around 7:30 p.m. Friday evening, but the storm track makes a huge difference here. If the low pressure stays about 100 miles offshore, D.C. sees 4 to 7 inches. If it comes closer, totals jump to 8 to 11 inches. Peak timing: Saturday morning from 4 a.m. to 11 a.m. Snow ends by 2 p.m. Saturday. Baltimore, Maryland. Snow starts 7 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning 3 a.m. to 10 a.m. Expected total 3 to 7 inches, with higher amounts possible in southern suburbs. Salisbury, Maryland. Snow begins 8 p.m. Friday. Peak Saturday morning 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. Expected accumulation 7 to 11 inches due to coastal enhancement. Now we move to Delaware and New Jersey. Wilmington, Delaware. Snow starts 6:30 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 2 a.m. to 9 a.m. Expected total 4 to 8 inches. Dover, Delaware. Snow begins 7 p.m. Friday. Peak Saturday morning 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. Expected accumulation 6 to 10 inches. Atlantic City, New Jersey. This is where the forecast gets extremely tricky. If the storm center passes within 75 miles of the coast, Atlantic City could see 12 to 18 inches. If it stays further offshore, totals drop to 4 to 8 inches. Snow begins around 6 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 4 a.m. to noon. This is a high uncertainty forecast. Trenton, New Jersey. Snow starts 6 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from midnight to 8 a.m. Expected total 2 to 6 inches. Newark, New Jersey. Snow begins 5:30 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 1 a.m. to 8 a.m. Expected accumulation 1 to 4 inches, with the possibility of mainly rain if the storm tracks closer. Let's move to Pennsylvania. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Snow begins 6 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from midnight to 7 a.m. Expected total 2 to 5 inches, with the southern suburbs seeing higher amounts. Allentown, Pennsylvania. Snow starts 5:30 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 11 p.m. Friday to 6 a.m. Saturday. Expected accumulation 3 to 6 inches. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This storm will be mostly a non-event for Pittsburgh. Light snow possible Friday night with accumulations under 2 inches. Now let's talk about New York, which has a split forecast. New York City. The 5 boroughs will see snow beginning around 5 p.m. Friday evening, but this is highly dependent on exact storm track. Peak timing Saturday morning from midnight to 7 a.m. If the storm stays offshore, expect 1 to 3 inches. If it tracks closer, totals could reach 5 to 8 inches. This is a very low confidence forecast for New York City proper. Long Island, New York. The eastern end of Long Island is in a much better position. Snow begins 5:30 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern Suffolk County could see 8 to 14 inches, especially in areas like Montauk and the Hamptons. Albany, New York. Minimal impact. Light snow Friday evening with totals under 2 inches. Syracuse, New York. Lake effect snow possible before and after the storm, but this coastal system misses Syracuse. Totals under 1 inch from the nor'easter itself. Rochester, New York. Same story as Syracuse. Minimal impact from this storm. Buffalo, New York. Lake effect snow likely, but not from this coastal storm. This system stays well to the east. Now let's cover Connecticut. Hartford, Connecticut. Snow begins around 5 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 1 a.m. to 8 a.m. Expected total 2 to 6 inches. New Haven, Connecticut. Snow starts 5:30 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 2 a.m. to 9 a.m. Expected accumulation 3 to 7 inches, with coastal areas seeing higher totals. Bridgeport, Connecticut. Snow begins 5:30 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. Expected total 4 to 8 inches. Now here's where this storm really explodes. Rhode Island and Massachusetts. Providence, Rhode Island. Snow begins 5 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from midnight to 9 a.m. Expected accumulation 6 to 12 inches. Newport, Rhode Island. Snow starts 5 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 1 a.m. to 10 a.m. Expected total 8 to 14 inches with blizzard conditions possible. Boston, Massachusetts, mark this down. Snow begins 4:30 p.m. Friday evening. Peak intensity Saturday morning from midnight to 11 a.m. Expected accumulation 6 to 12 inches for the city proper, with totals increasing dramatically as you head toward the coast. Worcester, Massachusetts, snow starts 4:30 p.m. Friday evening, peak Saturday morning from 11 p.m. Friday to 8 a.m. Saturday. Expected total 8 to 14 inches. Springfield, Massachusetts, snow begins 5 p.m. Friday evening, peak Saturday morning from midnight to 7 a.m. Expected accumulation 4 to 8 inches. Now here's the forecast that has meteorologists most concerned. Cape Cod, Massachusetts, snow begins 4 p.m. Friday afternoon. Yes, afternoon. This area gets hit first and gets hit hardest. Peak intensity Saturday morning from 10 p.m. Friday to 2 p.m. Saturday. Expected accumulation 18 to 28 inches. Wind gusts potentially reaching 70 miles per hour. This is a particularly dangerous blizzard. Whiteout conditions are guaranteed. Power outages are likely. This is a stay inside and do not travel situation. Nantucket, Massachusetts, nearly identical to Cape Cod. Snow starts 4 p.m. Friday afternoon. Peak Friday night through Saturday afternoon. Expected total 20 to 30 inches with hurricane-force wind gusts. Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. Same catastrophic conditions as Nantucket. Snow begins 4 p.m. Friday. Peak Friday night through Saturday morning. Expected accumulation 18 to 26 inches. Let's continue north to New Hampshire and Maine. Manchester, New Hampshire. Snow begins 4 p.m. Friday afternoon. Peak Saturday morning from 11 p.m. Friday to 7 a.m. Saturday. Expected total 6 to 11 inches. Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Snow starts 4 p.m. Friday afternoon. Peak Saturday morning from 10 p.m. Friday to 9 a.m. Saturday. Expected accumulation 9 to 15 inches with blizzard conditions likely. Portland, Maine. Snow begins 3:30 p.m. Friday afternoon. Peak Saturday morning from 9 p.m. Friday to 8 a.m. Saturday. Expected total 8 to 14 inches. Bangor, Maine. Snow starts 3 p.m. Friday afternoon. Peak Saturday morning from 8 p.m. Friday to 6 a.m. Saturday. Expected accumulation 6 to 10 inches. Augusta, Maine. Snow begins 3:30 p.m. Friday afternoon. Peak Saturday morning from 9 p.m. Friday to 7 a.m. Saturday. Expected total 7 to 12 inches. Now, let's cover Vermont. Burlington, Vermont. Minimal impact from this coastal storm. Light snow possible with totals under 3 inches. Montpelier, Vermont. Same as Burlington. This storm stays well to the east. Accumulations under 2 inches. Let's hit some additional key cities and towns. Greenville, South Carolina. Snow begins 10 p.m. Friday night. Peak Saturday morning from 7 a.m. to noon. Expected total 4 to 7 inches. Asheville, North Carolina. Snow starts 8 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. Expected accumulation 3 to 6 inches. Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Snow begins 8:30 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. Expected total 7 to 11 inches. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Snow starts 11:30 p.m. Friday night, likely mixing with sleet and rain. Expected snow accumulation 1 to 3 inches before transition. Roanoke, Virginia. Snow begins 8 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. Expected total 5 to 8 inches. Fredericksburg, Virginia. Snow starts 8 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 5 a.m. to noon. Expected accumulation 6 to 10 inches. Annapolis, Maryland. Snow begins 7:30 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. Expected total 5 to 9 inches. Ocean City, Maryland. Snow starts 7 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. Expected accumulation 9 to 14 inches with blizzard conditions possible. Cape May, New Jersey. Snow begins 6:30 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 4 a.m. to noon. Expected total 10 to 16 inches with blizzard conditions likely. Asbury Park, New Jersey. Snow starts 6 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 3 a.m. to 10 a.m. Expected accumulation, 6 to 12 inches. Scranton, Pennsylvania. Snow begins 5:30 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from midnight to 7 a.m. Expected total, 4 to 7 inches. Reading, Pennsylvania. Snow starts 6 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 1 a.m. to 8 a.m. Expected accumulation, 3 to 6 inches. Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Snow begins 6 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 2 a.m. to 9 a.m. Expected total, 4 to 7 inches. Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Snow starts 6 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 1 a.m. to 8 a.m. Expected accumulation, 3 to 6 inches. Stamford, Connecticut. Snow begins 5:30 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 2 a.m. to 9 a.m. Expected total, 3 to 7 inches. Danbury, Connecticut. Snow starts 5:30 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from 1 a.m. to 8 a.m. Expected accumulation, 4 to 8 inches. New Bedford, Massachusetts. Snow begins 4:30 p.m. Friday afternoon. Peak Saturday morning from 11 p.m. Friday to 11 a.m. Saturday. Expected total, 12 to 18 inches with blizzard conditions. Fall River, Massachusetts. Snow starts 4:30 p.m. Friday afternoon. Peak Saturday morning from 11 p.m. Friday to 10 a.m. Saturday. Expected accumulation, 10 to 16 inches. Lowell, Massachusetts. Snow begins 4:30 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from midnight to 8 a.m. Expected total, 7 to 12 inches. Brockton, Massachusetts. Snow starts 4:30 p.m. Friday evening. Peak Saturday morning from midnight to 9 a.m. Expected accumulation, 8 to 14 inches. Barnstable, Massachusetts. Snow begins 4 p.m. Friday afternoon. Peak Saturday morning from 10 p.m. Friday to 1 p.m. Saturday. Expected total, 20 to 28 inches with dangerous blizzard conditions. Now let me address the question everyone's asking. Why is this forecast so confident? We have 5 different weather models: the European, the GFS, the Canadian, the NAM, and the HRRR, all showing remarkably similar solutions. When models converge like this 48 to 72 hours before an event, the probability of the forecast verifying is extremely high. But here's something critical. There is still one major wild card. It's called the dry slot. Imagine the storm as a giant pinwheel. In the center and on the western edge, you have heavy precipitation, but on the southern and southwestern flank, there's an area where dry air wraps around and punches into the storm. This creates what we call the dry slot of doom. If you end up in the dry slot, your snow totals will be significantly less than forecast. The problem is, we won't know exactly where that dry slot sets up until the storm is already underway. This is why cities like Columbia, South Carolina, and even Charlotte, North Carolina have such wide ranges in their forecast totals. Now let's talk about the winds, because this isn't just a snow story. This is also a wind story. From the Outer Banks of North Carolina through Cape Cod, Massachusetts, wind gusts will be extraordinary. We're talking about sustained winds of 30 to 40 miles per hour with gusts reaching 50 to 70 miles per hour. In the strongest part of the storm, isolated gusts could even touch 80 miles per hour. What does this mean practically? It means blizzard conditions. The National Weather Service definition of a blizzard is snow with winds over 35 miles per hour, reducing visibility to less than a quarter mile for at least 3 hours. Based on current forecasts, blizzard warnings will likely be issued for coastal North Carolina, coastal Virginia, coastal Delaware, coastal Maryland, coastal New Jersey, coastal Rhode Island, and all of Cape Cod and the islands. These are not conditions you want to be driving in. These are not conditions you want to be outside in. This is dangerous, life-threatening weather. Power outages are highly likely, especially in areas that see heavy, wet snow combined with strong winds. Trees will come down. Power lines will snap. Some areas could be without electricity for days. Here's what you need to do right now if you're in the impact zone. Number 1. Charge all your devices. Number 2. Make sure you have flashlights and batteries. Number 3. Fill your bathtubs with water in case you lose water pressure. Number 4. Stock up on non-perishable food. Number 5. Fill your car with gas. Number 6. If you take medication, make sure you have enough for at least 5 days. And here's something people forget. Make sure you have a way to heat your home if the power goes out. Carbon monoxide poisoning spikes during winter storms because people use generators or grills indoors. Never do this. Never run a generator inside your home or garage. Never use a charcoal grill indoors. The carbon monoxide will kill you. Now, I want to address one more thing before we wrap up. Some of you watching this are thinking, this sounds like fear-mongering. Let me be crystal clear. This is not fear-mongering. This is a legitimate major winter storm with the potential to be the most significant snow event in over a decade for parts of the eastern United States. The atmospheric setup is textbook. The cold air is in place. The upper-level dynamics are perfect. The moisture is abundant. Everything that needs to happen for a major snow event is happening. But here's what I also want you to know. If you prepare properly, if you take this seriously, if you don't try to travel during the storm, you will be fine. This is not the end of the world. This is a winter storm. We've dealt with winter storms before. We'll deal with winter storms again. The key is preparation and respect for the power of nature. Now, before we end, I need you to do something for me. In the comments below, tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your city, your town, your location. Because after this storm moves through, I want to do a follow-up video where we compare the forecast to what actually happened in your area. And I'll shout out cities that got the most snow, cities that got less than expected, all of it. Also, if you found this detailed breakdown helpful, if you appreciate getting exact timing and city-by-city forecasts instead of vague generalities, let me know in the comments. Your feedback helps me understand what kind of content is most valuable to you. And here's a teaser for what's coming next. After this storm moves through, there are already signals in the long-range models for another potential winter storm around February 7th to 9th. It's too early to have any confidence in that forecast, but I'll be tracking it closely, so make sure you come back for updates. The models are also hinting at a potential Arctic outbreak in mid-February that could bring some of the coldest air of the entire winter season. We're talking about wind chills potentially dropping below zero as far south as Tennessee and northern Alabama. I'll have a full breakdown of that pattern in an upcoming video. Remember, winter isn't over. We're right in the heart of peak winter storm season. January and February are historically the snowiest months for the eastern United States, and this year, the pattern is finally delivering. One more thing. If you're new here and you found this forecast helpful, this is the kind of detailed, no-nonsense weather coverage we provide. No clickbait, no exaggeration, just the meteorology, the data, and the forecast delivered in a way that actually helps you prepare and make informed decisions. The storm begins Friday evening for most locations. Peak intensity Saturday morning through Saturday afternoon. Conditions improve Saturday evening and Sunday as the storm pulls away into the North Atlantic. Stay safe out there. Take this storm seriously, but don't panic. Preparation is the key to getting through any winter storm safely. I'll be updating the forecast as we get closer to the event. Check back for any changes in timing or snow totals. Weather is always evolving, and while this forecast has high confidence, small shifts in the storm track can make big differences in exactly who sees what. Comment below with your location. Let's build a community of weather watchers who can share real-time reports as this storm unfolds. Your observations from the ground are incredibly valuable. This is going to be a historic winter storm for many communities. Document it safely. Take pictures. Measure the snow. But most importantly, stay inside and stay warm. Until the next update, stay weather aware.